The cargo bay smelled like burnt metal and something else Amy Carter could not name. She walked between the damaged containers, checking each one with her scanner. Station Meridian had received an emergency shipment from a destroyed freighter. Most of the cargo was ruined, but Amy's job was to sort through everything anyway. She was tired. Her shift should have ended 2 hours ago, but the station commander needed this work done tonight. Amy moved her scanner over another container and frowned. The readings were strange. She marked it for closer inspection and moved to the next one. That was when she heard it, a small sound almost like a whimper. Amy stopped walking. She turned her head, listening. Station Meridian was never quiet. The hum of air processors, the distant clang of metal on metal, the chatter of voices over the comm system. But this sound was different. It was alive. She walked back to the container with the strange readings. The metal was bent inward and there were scorch marks along one side. Amy knelt down and pressed her ear against it. There. The sound came again. Definitely something alive inside. "Control, this is Carter in Bay 7, she said into her comm. "I need a cutting team down here. I have a container with possible life signs." The response crackled back. "Cutting team is busy with hull repairs. Can you wait?" Amy listened to the sound again. It was weaker now. "No, I'm opening it myself." She grabbed a plasma cutter from the tool station and adjusted it to low power. The container was already damaged. It would not take much to get it open. She worked carefully, cutting along the seam where the door had been crushed shut. The metal fell away with a loud clang. Amy pulled the door open and looked inside. 3 pairs of large eyes stared back at her. They were small, no bigger than human toddlers. Their fur was matted with dried blood and dirt. One had a gash across its shoulder. Another was curled into a ball, shaking. The third, the smallest one, made that whimpering sound again. Amy recognized them from the species database. A warrior race from the outer rim. She had seen adult before, tall and powerful, with sharp claws and teeth that could tear through metal. These were cubs, bobbies. "Oh no," Amy whispered. "What happened to you?" The cubs did not answer. They pressed themselves against the back of the container, watching her with fear in their eyes. Amy set down the plasma cutter slowly. She held up her hands, showing she had no weapons. "It's okay," she said softly. "I won't hurt you." The largest cub, the one with the gash, growled. It was a tiny sound, more scared than threatening. Amy sat down on the floor, making herself smaller. "I know you can't understand me, but you're safe now. Let me help you." She reached for her comm. "Control, I need medical down here, and get Commander Brooks. We have a situation." The next hour passed in chaos. Station security arrived first, their weapons drawn. Amy stood between them and the cubs, her arms spread wide. "Put those away. They're children." Dr. Rick Palmer came next, his medical bag in hand. He took one look at the cubs and shook his head. "I'm not trained for this. I need to call the xenobiology team." Commander Lisa Brooks arrived last. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked at the cubs, then at Amy, then at the damaged container. "Explain." Amy told her everything, the strange readings, the sounds, opening the container and finding them inside. "Their ship must have been destroyed in the pirate attack last week," Brooks said. "Someone hid them in the cargo, hoping they would survive." She was quiet for a moment. "Contact the embassy. They need to know their young are here." The cubs were taken to the medical bay. Amy followed, ignoring Brooks's suggestion that she go home. She watched as Dr. Palmer and his team carefully examined them. The gash was cleaned and sealed. The shaking one had a fever. The smallest had a broken bone in its leg that had started to heal wrong. When the medical team tried to move the cubs to separate beds, they panicked. The largest one bit a nurse. The smallest started making a high-pitched crying sound. The middle one tried to climb the wall. "Stop," Amy said. She walked over to the largest cub and knelt down. "Hey, look at me." The cub turned its head, teeth bared. "I know you're scared," Amy said, "but these people are trying to help you. Let them help." The cub did not understand her words, but something in her voice must have reached it. The aggressive stance softened. The teeth disappeared. Amy looked at the medical team. "Put them in one bed. They need to stay together." Dr. Palmer nodded. The three cubs were placed in a single large medical bed. They immediately huddled together, the largest one in the middle. Amy pulled a chair next to the bed. She sat down and placed her hand where the cubs could see it. "I'll stay with you." The hours passed slowly. The medical staff came and went, checking monitors and adjusting treatment. The cubs drifted in and out of sleep, but whenever Amy moved, their eyes snapped open. Around midnight, Commander Brooks returned. "The embassy is sending a diplomat. He'll arrive in 3 days." 3 days, Amy looked at the cubs. "What happens until then?" "Station security will guard them. They'll stay in medical." Amy shook her head. "They're terrified. They need stability, not guards with guns." "They're not pets, Carter. Their people will want them back." "I know that, but right now they're hurt and scared and alone." Amy met Brooks's eyes. "Let me take them to my quarters, just until the diplomat arrives." "You're not qualified for this. Neither is anyone else on this station, but I'm the one they've started to trust." Brooks looked at the cubs. The smallest one had its tiny hand wrapped around Amy's finger. "Fine, 3 days, but if anything goes wrong, they come back here." Amy carried the cubs to her quarters one at a time. They were heavier than they looked. She set up a nest of blankets on her floor and placed them inside. The cubs immediately curled together. She sat against the wall, watching them. She had never wanted children, had never been good with kids, human or otherwise. But as she watched these small creatures sleep, something in her chest tightened. Someone had loved them enough to hide them in cargo. Someone had hoped they would survive. And now they were here in her quarters, trusting her to keep them safe. Amy pulled her jacket around herself. 3 days. She could do this for 3 days. The smallest cub made a sound in its sleep, not scared this time, almost content. Amy closed her eyes. 3 days would probably turn into more. It always did. But right now, that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, she just had to make sure they kept breathing. Amy woke up to the sound of something breaking. She jumped to her feet, heart pounding. The cubs were awake. The smallest one had knocked over her lamp and glass covered the floor. The other two were backing away from the mess, their ears flat against their heads. "Stop," Amy said. "Don't move, there's glass." The cubs froze. They watched her with wide eyes as she grabbed her shoes and carefully swept up the broken pieces. When the floor was clear, she sat down in front of them. "Okay, new rule. Nothing on the floor is a toy." The largest cub tilted its head, studying her face. Amy realized she needed names for them. She could not keep thinking of them as the largest one and the smallest one. The largest had a white mark on her forehead that looked like a star. "Little star," Amy said, pointing at her. The middle one had stripes along its back. Stripes. The smallest had patches of darker fur on its ears. Patches. The names were silly, but they would do for now. Amy's stomach growled. She realized she had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. The cubs must be hungry too. She walked to her small kitchen and opened the cooling unit. Human food. Nothing a cub would eat. She grabbed her comm. "Dr. Palmer, what do cubs eat?" There was a pause. "I'm still researching that. Why?" "Because I have 3 hungry cubs in my quarters and no food for them." Another pause. "Try protein paste. High calorie, low sugar. I'll send someone with supplies." 30 minutes later, Dan Torres arrived at her door. He was carrying 2 large bags. "I raided the xenobiology lab," he said. "Palmer says try these." Amy looked through the bags. Protein paste in squeeze tubes, vitamin supplements, something that looked like dried meat, a few containers of liquid that smelled awful. Thanks, Dan. How are they doing? He tried to look past her into the quarters. Scared, hungry, I'm making this up as I go. Dan smiled. That's pretty much parenting for every species. After he left, Amy opened one of the protein paste tubes. The cubs watched her carefully. She squeezed some onto her finger and held it out. Little Star sniffed it, then she turned away. Amy tried the dried meat, same response. Patches, the smallest, started making a soft crying sound. Its stomach made a loud rumbling noise. Amy felt helpless. She had food, but they would not eat it. She tried the liquid next. The smell made her gag, but she poured some into a bowl. Stripes moved forward slowly. It dipped one finger into the liquid, then licked it. A moment later, all three cubs were drinking from the bowl. Amy let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Good, that's good. The cubs finished the bowl and looked at her for more. She gave them another one, then another. They drank until their bellies were round. With food in them, the cubs relaxed. Little Star explored the quarters, sniffing everything. Stripes curled up in the blanket nest and fell asleep. Patches stayed close to Amy, following her as she moved around the room. Amy's comm beeped. Commander Brooks, Carter, report to my office. Amy looked at the cubs. I can't leave them alone. Bring them with you. The walk through the station was difficult. The cubs did not like the crowds. People stopped to stare, and the cubs pressed against Amy's legs, trembling. Little Star growled at anyone who got too close. Brooks's office was quiet at least. The commander sat behind her desk, a data pad in front of her. The diplomat sent a message. He's arriving tomorrow, not in 3 days. He wants the cubs transferred to medical immediately. They just started eating. They're finally calm. They're not your cubs, Carter. They belong with their own people. I know that. Amy ran a hand through her hair. But they need time to adjust. Moving them now will just traumatize them again. Brooks was quiet for a moment. She looked at the cubs. Patches had climbed into Amy's lap. Little Star sat at her feet, alert and watching. Stripes had fallen asleep against Amy's leg. You have until the diplomat arrives. 20 hours, make them presentable. Back in her quarters, Amy gave the cubs a bath. This turned out to be a terrible idea. They hated water. Little Star tried to climb the walls. Stripes made a sound like an alarm. Patches bit Amy's hand, not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to hurt. Amy gave up and used wet cloths instead. She cleaned the dried blood from their fur, careful around the healing wounds. The cubs complained but did not fight as much. That night Amy tried to sleep in her bed. The cubs had other plans. One by one they climbed up and joined her. Little Star pressed against her chest. Patches curled under her chin. Stripes sprawled across her legs. Amy lay very still, afraid to move. The cubs were warm and surprisingly heavy. Their breathing slowly synced up, soft and steady. She thought about the diplomat coming tomorrow, about handing the cubs over to strangers. The cubs would go to a family, learn ways, grow into warriors. That was right. That was how it should be. But her chest ached at the thought. The next morning came too fast. Amy fed the cubs, cleaned up the quarters, and tried to make herself presentable. She had not slept much. The cubs sensed her tension and stayed close. At midday, Commander Brooks called. The diplomat is here. Bring them to conference room 3. The conference room was large and cold. Ambassador stood at the far end, flanked by 2 guards. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with dark fur and scars across his face. His eyes fixed on the cubs immediately. These are the missing young, he said. His voice was deep and rough. I will take them now. Amy felt Little Star press against her leg. They've been through a lot. They need time to adjust. They need to be with their own kind. Moved forward. Human, step aside. Little Star growled. It was a real growl this time, full of warning. Stopped, he stared at the cub, then at Amy. What have you done to them? I kept them alive. I fed them and cleaned their wounds and made sure they felt safe. You have taught them to fear their own people. His voice rose. You have corrupted them with human weakness. Amy's hands clenched into fists. They're not corrupted, they're scared, and they have every right to be. Commander Brooks stepped between them. Ambassador, perhaps we should move slowly. The cubs have bonded with Carter. Separating them suddenly might cause distress. Young do not bond with aliens, but was looking at little Star, who had moved to stand in front of Amy, her small body tense and ready to fight. This is not normal. Dr. Palmer entered the room carrying a data pad. Ambassador, I need to show you something. He pulled up brain scans on the wall display. These are from the cubs. See this pattern here. It's what call a den bond. They've imprinted on Carter as their primary caregiver. Stared at the scans. That is not possible. Den bonds only form with. Apparently not. Palmer crossed his arms. Breaking this bond now could cause permanent psychological damage. The cubs need time to transition gradually. The room was silent. Looked at the cubs, then at Amy, then at Brooks. How long? Brooks glanced at Amy. 2 weeks. Carter will continue to care for them while advisors teach her proper care techniques. Then we begin the transition. Was not happy, but he nodded. I will return in 2 weeks. The cubs will be ready then. After he left, Amy sat down hard in a chair. The cubs immediately climbed on her, checking to make sure she was okay. 2 weeks, Brooks said. That's all you get. Amy nodded. 2 weeks to prepare 3 traumatized cubs to leave the only safe person they knew. 2 weeks to teach them to trust again. 2 weeks to figure out how to let go. Patches made a soft chirping sound and patted Amy's face with one small hand. Amy closed her eyes and held the cub close. 2 weeks. She would make every day count. The advisor arrived the next day. Her name was Vara, and she looked at Amy like she was examining something unpleasant. She walked around Amy's quarters, checking the sleeping area, the food supplies, the temperature settings. Too warm, Vara said. Cubs need cooler temperatures to build strength. Amy adjusted the climate controls. The cubs had seemed comfortable, but what did she know about raising alien young? Vara pulled out a data pad. Cubs eat 4 times per day. They require protein, minerals, and specific vitamins found only in foods from I have brought proper supplies. She handed Amy several containers. Inside were things that looked nothing like food, dark chunks of something hard, green paste that smelled like old boots, dried strips of meat that felt like leather. They've been drinking that liquid supplement, Amy said. They seem to like it. Vara's expression darkened. That is emergency rations, not proper food. You feed them like sick animals, not growing warriors. Amy bit back a response. The cubs had been sick. They had been starving. The emergency rations had kept them alive. Little Star watched Vara from across the room. Her ears were flat and her tail twitched. She did not trust this new person. Vara noticed. The cubs are too attached to you. This is not healthy. Young learn independence early. They should not cling to one caregiver. They cling because they're traumatized. Their family died. They spent days trapped in a cargo container. All the more reason to teach them strength. Vara moved toward Little Star. Come here, young one. Let me see you. Little Star backed away, growling. Vara's eyes narrowed. She shows aggression to her own kind but submission to a human. This is wrong. Amy stepped between them. She shows caution to strangers. That seems pretty smart to me. The first week was hard. Vara came every day teaching Amy about customs. Cubs were raised in groups, never alone. They were taught to fight from the moment they could walk. Weakness was not tolerated. Fear was not tolerated. Amy tried to follow the lessons, but something felt wrong. The cubs were too young for combat training. They were still healing. They needed comfort, not harsh discipline. One afternoon, Patches fell and scraped its knee. It started crying, and Amy immediately picked it up. She checked the injury and cleaned it gently. Vara made a disapproving sound. You coddle them. A parent would tell the cub to stand and walk. Pain teaches strength. Pain teaches pain, Amy said quietly. Kindness teaches trust. Trust is earned through strength, not weakness. Amy looked at Patches, who had stopped crying and was now playing with her hair. I think there are different kinds of strength. By the second week, the cubs had learned a few words of English. Little Star could say Amy clearly now. Stripes said food whenever hungry. Patches said no to everything, which Amy found both frustrating and funny. Amy taught them human things too, even though Vara said it was pointless. She showed them how to draw with colored pencils. Little Star drew careful lines. Stripes made chaotic swirls. Patches mostly ate the pencils. She told them stories at night. Earth stories about brave people and distant places. The cubs did not understand all the words, but they listened to her voice and slowly relaxed into sleep. Dan visited often, bringing supplies and news from around the station. People are talking about you, he said one evening. The human raising cubs, some think you're crazy. Maybe I am. Amy watched the cubs play with a simple toy Dan had brought, a soft ball they could throw and chase. What do they think? Mixed opinions. Some are angry, some are curious. Vara reports everything to Ambassador. Amy had guessed as much. 2 weeks is almost up. Are you ready to let them go? Amy did not answer. She did not know how. On the 10th day, Commander Brooks called an emergency meeting. Amy brought the cubs as usual. They followed her everywhere now, a small parade of curious explorers. The conference room was crowded. Brooks stood at the front, her expression grim. We have a situation. Intel reports the pirate group that attacked shipping lanes 2 weeks ago is moving toward this sector. They've hit 3 mining colonies in the past 5 days. One of the security officers spoke up. Do we know what they want? Resources, ships, anything valuable. Brooks pulled up a star map. Station Meridian is directly in their projected path. Ambassador was present, along with several military officers. The fleet will defend this station, said, but we recommend evacuation of non-essential personnel. Where do the cubs fit in this? Amy asked. Looked at her. The cubs will be transferred to a warship immediately. They will be safe there. Amy felt cold. No. This is not a negotiation, human. If pirates attack, this station is a target. The cubs must be protected. They're safer here with me than on a warship heading into battle. The warship will not engage unless necessary. It will keep the cubs far from danger. Stood. The transfer happens tonight. Little Star had been quiet during the meeting, but now she made a sound. A questioning chirp directed at Amy. Amy knelt down to the cubs' eye level. They want to take you somewhere safe. Little Star's eyes were large and liquid. She reached out with both small hands and grabbed Amy's uniform. No, stay, Amy. Amy felt something crack in her chest. I know, sweetheart, but they're your people. They'll take care of you. No, Little Star's voice was firm. Stay, Amy. Stripes and Patches joined in, both clinging to Amy's legs. Their small voices created a chorus. Stay, Amy. Stay, Amy. The room was silent. Everyone watched this small drama unfold. Spoke quietly. This bond is too strong. Breaking it now will harm them. Dr. Palmer stepped forward. I warned you about this. Den bonds don't just dissolve because we want them to. These cubs identify Amy as their mother. Taking them from her suddenly would be like tearing them from their birth mother. We do not have time for gradual transitions, one of the officers said. Pirates could be here in days. Brooks rubbed her temples. Options. Keep the cubs on the station during the attack, Palmer said. It's risky, but separating them is guaranteed psychological damage. Put Carter on the warship with the cubs, Dan suggested, at least temporarily. Shook his head. A human aboard a warship is complicated. More complicated than traumatized cubs. Amy's voice was sharp. You want them safe and stable, then let me stay with them. The debate continued for an hour. Finally, a compromise was reached. The cubs would stay on the station with Amy, but they would be moved to a secure emergency shelter if pirates attacked. A security team would guard them. After the meeting, Vara approached Amy. You fight for them like they are your own young. They are young, that's enough. Vara studied her for a long moment. Perhaps humans are not as weak as I thought. That night Amy could not sleep. The cubs were restless too, sensing the tension in the air. She lay on her bed with all three of them pressed against her. Little Star patted Amy's face with one soft hand. Safe. Amy caught the small hand in her own. I'll keep you safe, I promise. It was a promise she hoped she could keep. The station's alarm system tested that night, a loud blaring sound that sent the cubs into a panic. They screamed and ran, trying to hide. Amy caught them one by one, pulling them close. It's okay, just a test, no danger. But Little Star was shaking, and Patches had its claws dug into Amy's shoulder. Stripes made a low keening sound that broke Amy's heart. Amy held them and rocked gently, humming a tune she remembered from her own childhood. Slowly, the cubs calmed. Their breathing evened out. The fear faded from their eyes. As she sat there in the dim light of her quarters, 3 alien cubs in her arms and danger looming in the darkness of space, Amy realized something. She had never wanted to be a mother, but somewhere in the past 2 weeks, that choice had been taken from her. These cubs were hers now, in every way that mattered, and she would fight anyone who tried to take them away. The attack came 3 days later without warning. Amy was in her quarters with the cubs when the first explosion hit. The entire station shook. Lights flickered. Emergency alarms screamed to life. Code red, all personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Amy grabbed her emergency kit and pulled out thermal blankets. Cubs, come here, now. Little Star was already moving, herding Stripes and Patches toward Amy. The cubs had learned to respond to urgency in her voice. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights went out completely, replaced by dim red emergency lighting. Amy wrapped each cub in a thermal blanket. We need to get to the shelter. She opened her door and looked into the corridor. People were running, screaming. Smoke poured from a vent down the hall. The acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. A third explosion rocked the station. The floor tilted. Amy grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. Behind her, the cubs cried out in fear. Stay close to me, Amy said. She picked up Patches, the smallest, and held the cub against her chest. Little Star, Stripes, hold onto my legs, don't let go. They moved into the corridor. Progress was slow. People pushed past them, desperate to reach the evacuation shuttles. A man knocked into Amy hard enough to make her stumble. Little Star growled at him, showing her small teeth. The shelter was 2 corridors away. Amy could see the reinforced door ahead. They just had to reach it. The station shook again. This time something in the ceiling broke. Metal and wiring crashed down, blocking the corridor ahead. Sparks flew. A woman screamed. Amy turned back, pulling the cubs with her. Other way, we'll go around. But the other way was worse. Fire had broken out in one of the residential sections. Automated systems were trying to contain it, but smoke filled the air. Amy pulled her shirt over her mouth and nose. The cubs coughed and whimpered. Almost there, Amy lied. She had no idea where they were going now. Every route to the shelter was blocked. A hand grabbed her shoulder. Amy spun, ready to fight. It was Dan. His face was covered in soot and blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. This way. Cargo Bay 5 has emergency doors. We can shelter there. He led them through maintenance corridors Amy had never seen before. The cubs stayed pressed against her legs, their small bodies trembling with each explosion. They reached Cargo Bay 5. A dozen other people were already there, huddled against the walls. Amy recognized some faces, a few warriors from the defense fleet, some human traders, an elderly couple who ran a shop on the station's main level. Dan checked the door controls. These should hold if there's a hull breach. If, not a word, anyone wanted to hear right now. Amy found a corner and settled the cubs around her. She gave them water from her emergency kit and checked them for injuries. Little Star had a small cut on one paw. Stripes had bruised its tail. Patches seemed unharmed but would not stop shaking. The explosions continued. Each one felt closer than the last. The bay's lights flickered and died, leaving only emergency strips along the floor. One of the warriors approached. He was huge, with gray fur and scars that told stories of old battles. His name tag read. "The cubs," he said. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "They should not be here." "No kidding," Amy said, "but here we are." Knelt down, looking at Little Star. He said something in. Little Star responded, her voice small and uncertain. His eyes widened. He looked at Amy. "She says you are her den mother." "I'm just trying to keep them alive." Den mother is not a small thing in our culture. Sat back on his heels. It is a title of great honor. Another explosion. This one was massive. The entire bay shook. Metal groaned. Someone screamed, "The door." Amy looked up. The cargo bay's outer door, the one that separated them from the void of space, was buckling. The reinforcement beams were bending. And the other warriors ran to the door. They grabbed support beams and tried to brace it, but the door continued to give way. "Everyone to the back of the bay," Dan shouted. "Now." People scrambled backward. Amy picked up all three cubs, one in her arms and two clinging to her back. She ran with the others to the far wall. The door buckled further. A gap appeared along one edge. Air began rushing out with a horrible whistling sound. The pressure change made Amy's ears pop. "We need to seal that gap," yelled over the noise, "or we all die." The warriors grabbed anything they could find. Metal plates, storage containers. They pressed them against the gap, but it was not enough. The door was failing. Little Star made a sound, a sharp chirp that cut through the chaos. She wriggled out of Amy's arms and ran toward the failing door. "No," Amy lunged after her, but Dan held her back. Little Star stood in the middle of the bay, looking at the warriors. She opened her mouth and began to sing. The sound was thin and high-pitched. It wavered and cracked, but it was unmistakably a war chant. Amy had heard the warriors sing it before when ships departed for battle. Stripes and Patches joined in. Three tiny voices singing words they had learned from parents now dead. Words about courage, about standing when others fall, about never surrendering to fear. The warriors froze, stared at the cubs, his mouth open. Then slowly he began to sing with them. His voice was deep and strong. The other warriors joined in. The song filled the bay. It drowned out the whistle of escaping air, the groan of failing metal, the sounds of fear and death. Amy did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. We do not run. We do not hide. We fight until our last breath. The warriors moved with renewed strength. They braced the door with their own bodies. They welded metal plates into place. They refused to let the void take them. Little Star's voice gave out first. She stumbled, exhausted. Amy caught her and held her close. Stripes and Patches continued singing until finished the final verse. The door held. The warriors had sealed the gap. The whistling stopped. The pressure stabilized. Walked over to Amy and the cubs. He placed one massive hand on Little Star's small head. "These cubs have the hearts of warriors." Little Star looked up at him. "Amy strong too." His eyes met Amy's. "Yes, Amy strong too." The all-clear signal sounded an hour later. The pirates had been driven off by the defense fleet. The station was damaged but intact. Casualties were being counted. As people filed out of the cargo bay, stopped Amy. "What you have done for these cubs, teaching them to find courage in fear, this is the work of a den mother." "I just kept them safe." No, shook his head. "You taught them to keep themselves safe. You taught them that strength comes from within, not from claws or teeth." He paused. "The cubs sang a song they should not know. They learned it from dead parents, but they sang it with hope, not grief. That is your gift to them." Amy looked down at little Star, asleep in her arms, at stripes and patches curled against her sides. "I didn't teach them anything special." "You taught them that kindness is not weakness, that protecting others is the highest form of strength, that family is not blood but who stands beside you when the world is ending." Placed a hand over his heart in a gesture of respect. "These are lessons all warriors should learn. These cubs will carry them forever." Amy carried the cubs back to her quarters. They were exhausted, filthy, and traumatized all over again, but they were alive. She cleaned them gently and put them to bed in their nest of blankets. They did not want to let go of her, so she climbed in with them. As she lay there in the darkness, listening to them breathe, Amy made a new promise. Not just to keep them safe, but to teach them that safety and strength could coexist. That being a warrior meant choosing when to fight and when to show mercy. She did not know if she was qualified to teach these lessons, but she would try. For as long as they let her, she would try. The weeks after the attack changed everything. Word spread through the fleet about what happened in Cargo Bay 5. 3 cubs singing a warrior chant. A human woman teaching courage without violence. Cubs who chose to face fear instead of hiding from it. Warriors started visiting the station. They asked to see Amy and the cubs. They brought gifts. Weapons forged from rare metals. Cloth woven with clan symbols. Small tokens of respect that Amy did not fully understand. Ambassador came to her quarters one morning. He stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. The cubs watched him from their blanket nest, wary but no longer afraid. "I was wrong about you," said. His voice was stiff, like the words hurt to say. "You have honored these cubs more than I thought possible for a human." Amy did not know what to say. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, most would have given them to others. You kept them. You protected them. You taught them to be strong without losing their gentleness." Paused. "Tells me you have earned the title of Cub Mother." "I didn't earn anything. I just love them." "That is what makes you worthy of the title." Explained what it meant. In culture, a cub mother was not just someone who raised young. It was someone who shaped future warriors. Someone who taught cubs that true strength came from choosing to protect rather than to destroy. "It is the highest honor we can give," said. "Higher than warrior, higher than clan leader, because a cub mother builds the future of our people." Amy looked at the cubs. Little Star was playing with a drawing pad. Stripes was trying to stack blocks. Patches was chewing on everything as usual. They looked so normal, so innocent. "What happens now?" Amy asked. "That depends on you," handed her a data pad. "The council has made an offer. You would become an official liaison between humans and you would help teach our people about human methods of raising young. You would spend part of each year on worlds, part on human stations." Amy scrolled through the offer. It was generous. It would mean permanent residency rights on worlds, a salary, official diplomatic status, but most importantly, it meant staying connected to the cubs. "And the cubs?" she asked. "They would return to space to be raised by their clan, but you would visit regularly. You would remain part of their lives." Amy felt her throat tighten. "That's not the same as having them with me." "No, but it is better than losing them completely." His expression softened slightly. They must learn ways, but there is room for human wisdom too." Amy did not answer right away. She needed to think. That night she sat with the cubs and tried to explain. They were learning English faster now, understanding more. Little Star especially was quick to pick up new words. "There's a place far from here," Amy said. "A place where your people live. They want you to come home." "This home," Little Star said, pointing at the quarters, "with Amy." "I know, sweetheart, but you have another home too. With other, you need to learn about your own culture, your own history." Stripes looked worried. "Amy, come. Sometimes I'll visit. We won't be together all the time, but we'll still be family." Patches started to cry. It was a soft, broken sound that tore at Amy's heart. She pulled all three cubs close. "Listen to me. Just because we're apart doesn't mean I stop being your den mother. Just because you live somewhere else doesn't mean I stop loving you." "Promise?" Little Star asked. "I promise. No matter where you are, no matter how much time passes, you're mine and I'm yours." The decision was made. Amy accepted the liaison position. The cubs would leave in 2 weeks, giving them time to prepare for the transition. Vara came back to teach Amy more about culture. This time, her attitude was different. She treated Amy with respect, even asking for Amy's opinions on raising techniques. "The council is interested in your methods," Vara said. "Many cubs are raised harshly. They become strong, yes, but they also become cold. Your cubs are strong but still gentle. This is unusual." "Maybe strength and gentleness aren't opposites," Amy suggested. Vara considered this. Perhaps not. Dan helped Amy pack the cubs' belongings. They had accumulated quite a collection, drawings on every surface, toys scattered everywhere, blankets that smelled like home. "You're really doing this?" Dan asked, "letting them go?" "I'm not letting them go, I'm letting them grow." Amy folded a small blanket carefully. "They need their own culture, their own people. I can't give them that." "You gave them something better. You gave them love." "Love isn't enough. They need to know where they come from. They need to be proud of being." On the last night, Amy did not sleep. She stayed awake, memorizing everything. The way Little Star snored softly. The way Stripes twitched in sleep. The way Patches always ended up upside down in the blanket nest. Morning came too quickly. The transport ship arrived at noon. A delegation of clan elders came to collect the cubs. They were kind but formal, treating the cubs with a respect that made Amy's chest ache. These were important young ones, survivors of tragedy, students of the famous cub mother. Little Star did not want to leave. She held onto Amy's uniform with both hands, her eyes pleading, "Stay with Amy." Amy knelt down, cupping the cub's face in her hands. "You're going on an adventure. You'll meet other cubs like you. You'll learn amazing things. Come with. I'll come visit. In 3 months I'll come to your world and stay for a while, and then I'll come back again. And again, for as long as you want me." Stripes joined Little Star, wrapping his arms around Amy's neck. "Miss Amy. I'll miss you too, every single day, but you're brave, you're all so brave, you can do this." Patches was crying, making that broken sound again. Amy picked the smallest cub up and held tight. "You're going to be okay. All of you are going to be okay." The clan elders waited patiently. They understood this was hard. They had seen den bonds before, though never between species. Finally, Amy stood. She handed Patches to one of the elders. She watched as Little Star and Stripes were guided toward the transport ship. The cubs kept looking back, checking to make sure Amy was still there. At the airlock, Little Star stopped. She turned and ran back to Amy one last time. She pressed something into Amy's hand. It was a drawing, 3 small figures and 1 large one, all holding hands. Above them, Little Star had written in careful English letters, "Family." Amy's vision blurred with tears. Yes, family, always. Little Star touched Amy's face gently, the way Amy had done for her so many times. Then she turned and walked to the ship without looking back. The airlock closed. The transport ship departed. Amy stood at the observation window and watched until it disappeared among the stars. Commander Brooks found her there an hour later. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." You did good, Carter, better than good. Amy looked at the drawing in her hand. I hope so. 3 months passed in a blur. Amy threw herself into her new liaison work. She studied language and customs. She wrote reports on human child-rearing methods. She prepared for her first visit to a world. When the day finally came, Amy was more nervous than she had ever been. What if the cubs had forgotten her? What if they had moved on, bonded with new caregivers, built new lives that did not include her? It was beautiful and harsh just like its people. Mountains carved from black stone, forests of trees with silver bark, cities built into cliffsides. The clan elders met her at the spaceport. They escorted her to the clan compound, a massive structure that housed hundreds of. The cubs were in a training yard, learning basic combat forms with other young ones. Amy watched from a distance, her heart in her throat. Little Star moved with grace. Stripes was powerful for his size. Patches was small but quick. They had grown. They had changed. They were becoming who they were meant to be. Then Little Star saw her. The cub froze. Her ears perked up. She stared across the training yard at Amy. Amy, Little Star whispered, then louder, Amy. All three cubs abandoned their training and ran. They crashed into Amy with enough force to knock her down. They climbed on her, chirping and crying and trying to talk all at once. Missed Amy, missed so much. Amy came, Amy kept promise. Amy held them and laughed and cried at the same time. I told you, I'll always come back. They spent the next week together. Amy learned about their new life. They had foster families now, good families who treated them well. They were learning to be warriors, but they had kept the lessons Amy taught them too. Kindness, compassion, the understanding that strength meant protecting others. On her last night on the clan held a ceremony. They formally gave Amy the title of Cub Mother. They presented her with a ceremonial blade, a symbol of respect usually reserved for the greatest warriors. The clan leader spoke then in English. You are one of us now, not by blood but by honor. These cubs carry your teaching in their hearts. When they become warriors, they will remember. When they raise cubs of their own, they will teach what you taught them. Your legacy will live in our people for generations. Amy looked at the cubs, standing proud in their clan colors. They were not hers anymore, not in the way they had been, but they were still family. They always would be. 5 years later, Amy stood before the Galactic Council. The cubs, now young warriors in training, stood beside her. She was receiving full citizenship honors from the clans, the first human to achieve this. Reporters asked how it felt to be called Cub Mother across the galaxy. Amy thought about 3 small, terrified creatures in a cargo container, about sleepless nights and cultural barriers, and choosing love over convenience. I never claimed this title, she said. They gave it to me. All I did was show up and care. That's all any parent does, human or any species in between. Little Star, now tall and strong, placed a hand on Amy's shoulder. She taught us that protecting is stronger than conquering, that choosing mercy is braver than choosing violence. These lessons made us better warriors. They made us better people. The galaxy was watching. Other species were learning. Humans were not just survivors from a harsh world. They were bridge builders. They were teachers. They were parents who loved without boundaries. And sometimes, Amy thought, that made them more dangerous and more valuable than anyone had imagined. She looked at the 3 young warriors beside her and smiled. They had given her a title she never wanted. In return, she had given them a future built on compassion instead of cruelty. It was a fair trade. It was family.